Welcome to another episode of The Cynical Writer. Before we get started, I would just like to remind everyone that if you would like to support this channel, the best way to do that is to purchase my books, and I've left a link in the description section. And my latest book is The Ecstasy and the Ignominy, which is essentially a literary historical epic. So if you enjoy those kind of books, you will be able to find that. Now, I apologize if you can hear my dogs barking in the background because even though it's nearly 2 in the morning, sometimes if they hear a dog that's barking even way off, they'll start to bark at it. So I apologize for that. But the topic of today's video is, have writers turned their back on beauty? Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I think today especially, although this has been going on for at least 100 years, writing has become very utilitarian, where the constant writing advice that you hear is, don't be poetic or ostentatious. Get rid of those adjectives. Get rid of those verbs. Just let the writing speak for itself. But that's a utilitarian point of view. Um, it's not an inherent quality within writing. It's entirely subjective in that regard. I believe um, style and language, that it can have meaning in and of itself. It can have intrinsic worth and meaning in and of itself. And I also think that poetic language and descriptive prose can help you understand a story, and especially the themes of a story, on a deep level. And you might not be able to get that purely through plain or simple language all the time. Now, I do think that simple language, especially if it's rhythmic, can be there can be beauty in that. I'm not saying that there can't be, but to say that everyone should write like that is also a fallacy. I think this started with Ernest Hemingway, who often gave advice about you should be plain and simple, blah 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 blah. But this idea that everyone should write like Hemingway is ridiculous. Um, there was actually a war that went on between Hemingway and William Faulkner, where Faulkner said that Hemingway has never written any word where a reader would have to search for a dictionary. And then I think Hemingway wrote back and said, "Well, I'm just being honest and true and this or that." But to me, there's merit to both presentations. But I think that it can be a problem when one style becomes very prevalent and another style is shut out, which is what I think has happened with the exclusion of poetic prose, because most writers nowadays, especially in the mainstream, um, they write very simplistic sentences. But the problem with that is, again, is that there are so many things that are missed. I think that themes are better explored, especially through metaphor, through poetry, because that helps bring out ideas that aren't necessarily always noticeable on the surface. And I think I'll show you what I mean here by reading a passage from my book, The Ecstasy and the Ignominy, if I can find the proper page for it. Um, when I write at the end of chapter 21, under the golden sky, her Aurorian visage blossomed, becoming a living summer. She was a beauteous summer, compared to which even the seraphs of heaven were mere shadows. Through her Elysian orbs, all celestial gardens awakened, basking in eternal bliss. She was a sea that had become a star. In my heart, I knew that regardless of where life took me, she would always be my most coveted treasure, for summers never lie and stars never forget. Now, essentially, he could have said, well, I'll just never forget her. That's essentially what that means. But he's by actually comparing her beauty and things to the stars and to the summer, because we never forget, especially the first stars, that we see when we're young, the first night sky or the first beautiful summer that we experience. And by comparing her beauty to that, that creates a far more vivid image in the reader's mind, and the theme probes much deeper than if he were to just say, "I will never forget her." That's bland. It doesn't have the same powerful effect, and I think that's missing in modern prose. And I think it's because we live in this anti-intellectual culture, where we think that anyone who tries to sound intelligent or tries to sound poetic, that somehow many people are intimidated by that because they think somehow that they are being pretentious. But I think in reality, many people are just jealous that they can't do the same thing, and so, or they feel somehow that because they don't understand it, therefore it must be a threat to them. Their threat senses go off because it makes them feel insecure, and people will often become hateful towards things that they do not understand because it makes them feel insecure, because it evokes within them a sense of envy. And but to me, something is only, and so that's why if I could get rid of one word in the English language, it would be the word pretentious, because I think it is highly overused. It has a meaning, of course, but the real meaning is, someone is pretentious if they're trying to be something that they're not, if they're trying to put on a show. So if someone is writing the purely so they can seem intellectually superior to other people, and they don't actually care about the art form itself, then yes, they are being pretentious. um, but if they have a genuine interest in writing, if they have a genuine interest in poetry, if they have a genuine interest in beauty, then of course they're not being pretentious. They are being authentic, and that is something that we should cherish. So this word pretentious is highly overused. Um, to me, I actually believe that and this is something that the Romantics especially believed in the 19th century. A lot of 19th century writers believe this, that writing is that I believe writing can be a form of linguistic art, because I'm not very good at drawing, for example, but I paint with words. I think a writer can use words the same way that an artist uses a brush. I think they can be just as impactful and just as powerful. But what I resent is this modern way of thinking, where writing is purely viewed as utilitarian, where the story is all that matters and the style doesn't matter at all. Now, I'm not saying that the story doesn't matter at all. I actually do think that, to me, and I will say that if I had to choose between the two, that I do value the style of language slightly more than the story, especially in my own writing. I enjoy I enjoy writing the sentences more than I enjoy coming up with a story. But that doesn't mean, that's a personal preference, but that doesn't mean that the story does not matter. To me, the story is the foundation upon which the poetry stands, and the descriptive language stands. Like, making sure my microphone's on, but anyway, but like um, like for example, you can have a short story that is highly descriptive, um, that has no plot, and it can be interesting because it's only a short story. And you can also have a poem that does that as well. But with a book, you have to have an interesting plot to go with it. You can't just have the poetry, because it will get somewhat dull after a while. The story is the foundation upon which the poetry flourishes. Um, it is the story is what you would call the energy that gives the poetry its impact. Without that, yes, poetry and descriptive language can sound somewhat shallow, um, but it doesn't have to. I think the best thing is for writers, and the best writers do this, to come up with an exciting story and exciting poetry and combine those two things. And that is how great art is made. Shakespeare did that. Shakespeare was a master at language, but he was also a master storyteller. But the problem is now is that we tend to value practicality over over beauty. We tend to value utility over exploring themes on a deep level. And I think part of that is also because we live in this technological age where we want instant gratification. Um, no longer do people sit in a room and just ponder about the meaning of a sentence or of a paragraph. Because yes, appreciating poetry requires a great amount of work. It requires you, by poetry, I also mean poetic language as well, but it requires you to sit down and actually do the work to figure things out. But because we live in a society that is all about instant gratification, people have trouble with that. They want their next dopamine hit. But books aren't about that. Classic literature certainly isn't about that. It's about exploring deep themes. It's about exploring the human condition and exploring the deep recesses of the mind of the author and the characters in such a way where you lose yourself and you're not connected to anything else around you. But because we live in a world that is constantly connected to digital devices and the internet 24/7, that it's very difficult for people to actually engage in that. And I think it's very sad. Now, of course, I think this has always been a problem as long as writing has been around. This is not a new problem. Don't think for a second that I'm trying to blame this all on technology, because there have always been people, even hundreds of years ago, that have been resistant to actually exploring the beauty of language, because a lot of people, they don't want to actually work. They want what's easy. They want what's comfortable. But by doing that, they actually will miss out on the beauty that is inherent within language. Um, um, Modern technology has just made the problem worse. Um, but this isn't a problem. This problem isn't the result of modern society. It's just grown worse in modern society. So I think people need to make that distinction. But to me, like I could never write through through a utilitarian method, because I would lose so much of what I love about writing in that it just wouldn't be worth it. So for me, especially, I could never change the way that I write because the enjoyment just wouldn't be there for me anymore. So I think overall, people need to appreciate um, language as an art form. They need to appreciate the fact that language can paint vivid images just like art can, and people shouldn't view storytelling as purely a utilitarian force like they currently do. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, if you would like to support this channel, my books are linked in the description section. And until next time, goodbye.